Welcome, friends of history, to Roman Archives. Today we embark on one of the most extraordinary journeys the ancient world has to offer, the rise of Gaius Julius Caesar, a man whose ambition was as boundless as the empire he helped create. A man loved, feared, betrayed, and immortalized. His story is not just Roman history. It is the story of power itself, of how one individual can bend the destiny of an entire civilization. But before we begin, let me ask you, what makes a man unforgettable? Is it victory in battle, the loyalty of his soldiers, the love of the people, or the terror he strikes in the hearts of his enemies? Julius Caesar was all of these things at once. He was a general, a statesman, a reformer, and for many, a tyrant. His rise to power was as dramatic as his eventual fall, and the echoes of his life still shape our world today. The tale you are about to hear is not the simple biography of a Roman noble. It is the drama of an ambitious man who lived in an age of corruption, war, and chaos, and who dared to seize power where others hesitated. So settle in, because this is not a story to be told in passing. This is the story of a republic brought to its knees, not by invasion, not by disaster, but by the will of one man. Picture the city of Rome in the 1st century BCE. Marble temples and bustling markets fill the streets. Senators in white togas debate in the forum, while merchants haggle with customers in the shadow of ancient monuments. From the outside, Rome looks like the center of the world, wealthy, powerful, unstoppable. But beneath this glittering surface, the republic is rotting. The Senate is filled with corruption. The same men who boast of protecting Rome as traditions are the ones selling their influence for gold. Ordinary citizens, once the backbone of the republic, find themselves drowning in poverty as farmland is seized by the wealthy, and jobs vanish to waves of cheap slave labor. Veterans return from foreign wars only to be abandoned by the very state they fought to defend. And towering above it all is ambition, naked, ruthless ambition. Generals compete for power with armies more loyal to them than to the republic itself. Politicians incite mobs to violence in the streets. Civil war has already scarred the city, and more blood is yet to be spilled. Rome is powerful, yes, but Rome is also fragile. The republic is like a great statue, cracked at the base, ready to collapse. And into this world of chaos is born Gaius Julius Caesar. The name Caesar itself carried weight long before Julius took his first breath. His family, the Julii, claimed descent from none other than Venus, the goddess of love, through her son Aeneas, the Trojan hero who, according to legend, fled Troy and founded the line that would one day become Rome. But in truth, by the time of Caesar's birth in 100 BCE, his family's fortune had dwindled. The Julii were still patricians, members of Rome's old aristocracy, but they were far from the most powerful. They had the name, the heritage, but not the wealth. For most young nobles, this would have meant a quiet life on the margins of power, overshadowed by richer, louder, more influential men. But not for Caesar. Even in his youth, he believed he was destined for something greater. And as we will see, destiny has a way of favoring those who refuse to wait for it. Julius Caesar's rise is not the tale of a man who simply followed the rules. It is the tale of a man who bent them, broke them, and rewrote them in his own image. Where others hesitated, Caesar advanced. Where others compromised, Caesar demanded. Where others saw tradition as sacred, Caesar saw it as an obstacle. But it is important to remember, Caesar did not rise in a vacuum. He rose because Rome was ready for him, ready for someone bold enough to seize what the Senate no longer could hold. And so, the story of Caesar's rise is also the story of Rome's fall, the unraveling of a republic that had lasted for nearly 5 centuries. When we think of Caesar today, we think of monuments and legends. The conqueror of Gaul, the man who crossed the Rubicon, the dictator whose rule ended with betrayal on the Ides of March. But when he was young, Julius Caesar was not yet a conqueror, not yet a dictator. He was simply one man in a city of thousands with more ambition than sense and more enemies than friends. And yet somehow he would climb from obscurity to become the master of the Roman world. How? That is the question at the heart of this journey. Was it his charm, his military genius, his political cunning, Or was it simply that Rome, in its weakness, created the very man who would destroy it? As you'll see, Caesar's rise was no accident. Every step, every gamble, every betrayal, and every victory pushed him closer to the moment when Rome would no longer be governed by senators and laws, but by the will of a single man. So join me as we trace the path of this extraordinary figure from his first steps in the dangerous world of Roman politics to the moment when he crossed a shallow river and forever changed the fate of the Republic. This is not just the story of a man. It is the story of how ambition, when sharpened by opportunity and hardened by adversity, can topple even the mightiest of systems. And it begins, as all stories do, with the world into which he was born. To understand the rise of Julius Caesar, we must first understand the Rome into which he was born. Caesar did not emerge in a vacuum. He was the product of a city torn between its traditions and its ambitions, a republic that had conquered the known world but could not govern itself. In the century before Caesar's birth in 100 BCE, Rome had risen from a small city-state on the Italian peninsula to the master of the Mediterranean. It had defeated its great rival Carthage in the Punic Wars. It had absorbed Greece, subdued Spain, pushed into Asia Minor, and stretched its influence across North Africa. From the outside, this was Rome's golden age. Wealth flowed into the city. Exotic goods filled the markets. Victorious generals returned with parades, slaves, and treasure. Roman citizens could proudly say they belonged to the most powerful state the world had ever known. But with this power came problems that would eat away at the Republic from the inside. The Senate, Rome's governing body, was still made up of patricians, aristocrats who claimed to rule in the name of tradition and the Republic's laws. But by Caesar's time, many senators were corrupt. Their debates were less about serving the people and more about protecting their wealth and power. Meanwhile, ordinary Romans, the plebeians, suffered. Small farmers, once the backbone of Roman society, found themselves driven into poverty. As Rome expanded, vast estates were taken over by the wealthy, who filled them with slave labor imported from conquered lands. Many citizens abandoned the countryside and crowded into Rome itself, hoping for work, but often finding only hunger and unemployment. The streets of Rome became a boiling pot of frustration, with mobs ready to riot at the slightest provocation. Bread and circuses, free grain and gladiatorial games were used to keep the people distracted, but discontent simmered just beneath the surface. At the same time, Rome's military success created a new problem: generals who became more powerful than the state itself. In the early Republic, generals served Rome and their armies were loyal to the Senate. But by the 1st century BCE, this had changed. Soldiers no longer fought only for Rome, they fought for their commander. Generals promised them land, wealth, and security after their service. Loyalty shifted from the Republic to the man leading them. This change was disastrous. Suddenly, ambitious men could use armies as personal tools of power, and once an army was loyal to a general instead of the state, civil war became inevitable. This was the Rome that young Caesar inherited, a city that looked strong on the outside, but which was breaking apart under the weight of greed, inequality, and ambition. To see how dangerous this world had become, we must look at the two men who defined Roman politics just before Caesar's time: Gaius Marius and Lucius Cornelius Sulla. Marius, a brilliant general and populist, reformed the Roman army by recruiting landless citizens, men who had nothing, but who could be molded into professional soldiers. This change strengthened Rome's armies, but made them dependent on their commanders for land and reward after service. Marius became enormously popular with the people, but his power terrified the Senate. Enter Sulla, a patrician, a staunch defender of the aristocracy and a rival to Marius. Their conflict escalated into outright civil war. Sulla did what no Roman general had dared before. He marched his army into Rome itself. The streets ran red with blood. Political enemies were hunted, executed, and their property seized. Sulla eventually declared himself dictator, rewriting laws to strengthen the Senate and weaken popular leaders. His reign was brutal, and although he later stepped down, he left a message that no one could ignore: The Republic's rules could be broken, and power belonged to whoever dared take it. Young Julius Caesar watched all this closely. In fact, he was nearly destroyed by it. Marius was married into Caesar's family, his uncle by marriage, and when Sulla took power, Caesar became a target. But more on that in the next chapter. For now, remember this. The struggle between Marius and Sulla showed Rome the truth. The Republic was no longer ruled by law. It was ruled by force. Politics in Caesar's Rome was not polite debate. It was a battlefield. Senators openly bribed voters. Mobs loyal to different factions fought in the streets. Candidates for office drowned their opponents in debt, knowing that success meant access to power, wealth, and the chance to pay it all back. Even the Senate chamber itself was not safe. Senators shouted down opponents, threatened violence, and sometimes carried it out. Rome's proud traditions of law and debate were reduced to chaos. To the people, politicians seemed either corrupt aristocrats or dangerous radicals. To the Senate, anyone who gained popularity among the masses was a threat to be destroyed. This was the stage upon which Caesar would soon step. It may seem strange, but this chaos created opportunity. In a stable republic, ambition was checked by tradition, law, and balance of power. But in Caesar's Rome, those checks were crumbling. A clever man could rise by exploiting the anger of the people, the rivalries of generals, and the corruption of senators. And Caesar was clever. He would study rhetoric to charm the crowds, form alliances with the powerful to climb the political ladder, and lead armies with a charisma that bound soldiers to him for life. But none of that would have been possible in a healthy republic. Rome itself created Caesar. Rome's corruption, inequality, and endless civil wars built the very path that he would walk. By the time of Caesar's birth, the republic was already centuries old. For nearly 500 years, Rome had been proud of its system of checks and balances, 2 consuls instead of 1 king, a senate to guide policy, assemblies for the people. But by 100 BCE, this system was collapsing. The Senate was losing legitimacy. The assemblies were being manipulated. Consuls came and went, but real power rested in money, military strength, and mob control. And the people of Rome, weary of corruption, weary of poverty, weary of instability, were ready for something new. They were ready for a leader who could promise stability, reform, and victory. They were ready for Julius Caesar, even if they did not yet know his name. So here we stand at the dawn of Caesar's story. Rome is rich, but unstable. Powerful, but divided. Ambitious generals tear the republic apart, while ordinary citizens cry out for justice. It is into this world that a boy named Gaius Julius Caesar is born, an aristocrat by name but not by fortune. His family's glory is fading, his city is on the brink of collapse, and his own life will soon be placed in mortal danger. And yet, from these uncertain beginnings, he will rise. Next, we turn to Caesar's early life, his childhood, his education, and the daring episode with pirates that revealed the true measure of his character, long before he ever wore a laurel crown. Gaius Julius Caesar was born in the year 100 BCE, during a time when Rome seemed unstoppable abroad but dangerously unstable at home. His family, the Julii, belonged to the patrician class, the ancient aristocracy of Rome, but by Caesar's day, the name carried more prestige than wealth. They were noble in title but poor in fortune, and this left young Caesar in a precarious position. He carried the blood of old Rome, yet lacked the resources that so often decided success. Still, his lineage mattered. The Julii claimed descent from Aeneas, the Trojan hero, and through him from Venus, goddess of love. To Romans, ancestry was not a quaint story. It was a mark of destiny. A boy with such a name might reasonably believe he was meant for greatness. Caesar would take that belief and forge it into ambition. Caesar grew up surrounded by the political chaos described earlier. His youth was shaped by the rivalry between Marius and Sulla, a conflict that turned the Republic into a battlefield. Caesar's uncle by marriage was none other than Gaius Marius, the great general who had reformed Rome's armies. This connection tied Caesar's family to the Populares, the faction that claimed to fight for the common people against the entrenched power of the Senate. But this alliance would bring danger. When Sulla, champion of the aristocratic Optimates, seized power after bloody civil war, he unleashed purges across Rome. Lists of the condemned, called proscriptions, were posted in the Forum. Anyone named on them could be killed on sight, their wealth seized, their families ruined. Caesar, still a teenager, suddenly found himself a target. His marriage to Cornelia, daughter of one of Marius's allies, placed him firmly in Sulla's crosshairs. He was ordered to divorce her. Caesar refused. This was no small act of defiance. Many men would have bent the knee to survive. But Caesar stood firm, even though it meant risking everything. Sulla stripped him of his inheritance and priesthood, confiscated his property, and forced him into hiding. At just 18 years old, Caesar became a fugitive in his own city. For months he lived on the run, moving from safe house to safe house, dodging Sulla's men, surviving on little. Eventually, powerful friends interceded on his behalf. Reluctantly, Sulla spared his life. Yet even in this act of mercy, he is said to have muttered darkly, "In this Caesar there are many Mariuses." It was a warning. He saw in the boy the same dangerous ambition that had once threatened the Republic. History would prove him right. Having narrowly escaped death, Caesar began a journey of survival and self-discovery. He left Rome to serve in the army, a safer path than politics in those bloody years. In Asia Minor, he quickly distinguished himself. At the siege of Mytilene, Caesar fought bravely, earning the Corona Civica, the civic crown, awarded to those who saved the life of a fellow Roman in battle. It was a rare honor, worn proudly for life. Already the young noble was showing courage and a hunger for glory. But his greatest test was yet to come. Around the year 75 BCE, while traveling across the Mediterranean, Caesar's ship was captured by Cilician pirates, a scourge of the seas at the time. These pirates were notorious for their cruelty, kidnapping nobles and demanding ransom while often killing their captives afterward. For most Romans, this would have been a nightmare. But for Caesar, it became an opportunity to reveal his character. The pirates demanded 20 talents of silver for his release. Outrageous as it was, Caesar laughed at them. 20 talents? He told them they clearly did not know who he was. He insisted they demand 50. The pirates, amused, agreed. While his companions went to raise the ransom, Caesar remained their prisoner. But he behaved less like a captive than a commander. He scolded the pirates when they failed to show him proper respect. He joined their games, recited poetry and speeches to them, and even joked that one day he would return and crucify them all. The pirates laughed. But Caesar was deadly serious. After 38 days in captivity, the ransom was paid, and Caesar was released. Most men would have counted themselves lucky to escape alive. Not Caesar. He immediately raised a small fleet, hunted down the pirates, and captured them. True to his word, he had them crucified, though in an act of calculated mercy, he ordered their throats cut first to spare them prolonged suffering. It was a brutal episode, but also revealing. Even as a young man, Caesar displayed charisma, audacity, and ruthless determination. He could charm his enemies in one breath and destroy them in the next. He could joke about crucifixion, and then carry it out without hesitation. Across Rome, it marked Caesar as a man to watch, one who would not be humiliated, one who turned even misfortune into triumph. When Caesar returned to Rome, he did so with new confidence. He had survived Sulla's wrath, earned honors in battle, and avenged himself upon the pirates. He was no longer just a patrician youth with fading family fortunes. He was a man with a reputation, but ambition in Rome was expensive. Elections were won with bribes, favors, and lavish spectacles for the people. Caesar had none of the wealth required to climb the political ladder. Instead, he relied on charm, eloquence, and debt. Caesar was a brilliant orator. He could sway crowds with fiery speeches, stirring the hearts of ordinary citizens while unnerving his rivals. His style was passionate, direct, and unforgettable. Soon, he became a favorite of the populares faction, gaining allies among those who sought to weaken the Senate's grip on power. At the same time, he cultivated friendships with Rome's most influential figures. He learned to balance alliances carefully, to make himself useful to powerful men without being swallowed by their ambitions. But what truly set him apart was his boldness. While many young nobles waited patiently for their turn, Caesar leapt forward. He was not content to play by the rules. He bent them, stretched them, and when necessary, broke them. Caesar's early life reveals the qualities that would define him forever. Charm and eloquence. He could win allies with words alone. Defiance. From refusing Sulla's orders to mocking the pirates, he never bowed easily. Ambition, poverty, and danger did not deter him. They drove him. Ruthlessness, mercy, and brutality came from him in equal measure, always chosen to serve his purpose. The boy born into a fading aristocratic family had become a man of extraordinary potential. Rome, still teetering between chaos and order, had no idea that the stage was being set for its most dramatic transformation yet. As Caesar returned to political life in Rome, the city was once again in turmoil. Rival factions clashed, corruption spread, and generals loomed in the background with their armies. The Republic was a battlefield without walls, and survival required not just ambition, but brilliance. Caesar had both. His defiance of Sulla had proven his courage. His time with the pirates had proven his resolve. His oratory and charm were already winning him popularity. The pieces were falling into place. The boy who had once fled for his life would soon stand at the heart of Roman politics, and every step forward would carry him closer to his destiny, not as a servant of the Republic, but as the man who would break it. By the time Caesar returned from his adventures abroad, Rome was still in turmoil. The wounds left by Marius and Sulla had not healed, and the Republic remained fragile. Political violence, corruption, and the growing dominance of military strongmen defined the city. Into this storm Caesar stepped, armed with charm, daring, and relentless ambition. He had survived Sulla's wrath, earned glory in battle, and avenged himself upon pirates. Now, his sights were fixed firmly on Rome itself. Caesar knew he did not yet have the wealth of the great aristocrats or the legions of powerful generals, but he had one weapon that could not be bought: his voice. He was an extraordinary orator, trained in rhetoric both in Rome and abroad. His speeches combined elegance with fire. He could make the people laugh, weep, or burn with indignation. Unlike the stiff aristocratic senators who droned through debates, Caesar spoke with passion, often gesturing dramatically, always commanding attention. The people loved him for it. He positioned himself as a champion of the populares, the faction that claimed to speak for ordinary Romans against the entrenched power of the Senate. He argued for land reforms, debt relief, and limits on aristocratic corruption. To the masses, he was a rising star. To the Senate's conservative elite, he was a dangerous young radical. But Caesar understood something vital. Popularity was not enough. Rome's politics ran on favors, alliances, and above all, money. To climb higher, he would need support from those who had both wealth and power. Roman politics followed a structured path known as the cursus honorum, the ladder of offices. Young men of ambition began as quaestors, then moved on to aediles, praetors, and, if fortune allowed, to the highest office, consul. Each step demanded money to fund campaigns and provide spectacles for the people. Each step also demanded allies in the Senate and among the powerful families of Rome. Caesar pursued this path with tireless energy. As a quaestor, he served in Spain, where he gained both administrative experience and a reputation for fairness. Later, as an aedile, he staged lavish games, filling Rome with gladiators, exotic animals, and dazzling spectacles. The people adored him, cheering his name in the forum and whispering that he was destined for greatness. But these shows cost money, vast sums of it. Caesar plunged himself into debt, borrowing from wealthy patrons with the confidence that one day he would repay them with interest. Some creditors hesitated to loan so much to a single man. One of them, when asked why he trusted Caesar with such enormous sums, famously replied, "He has unlimited credit, for he is bound to pay us back when he becomes dictator." Even in his youth, men sensed his ambition. As Caesar rose, his enemies in the Senate grew wary. They remembered Sulla's warning, that within this young man were many Mariuses. They feared another populist who would use the people to tear down the aristocracy. When Caesar ran for the position of Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest of Rome, his opponents expected him to lose. He was still young, burdened with debt, and facing older, more established candidates. But Caesar campaigned relentlessly, bribed lavishly, and promised glory. Against all odds, he won. It was a shocking victory. The chief priesthood was not just a religious role, it was political gold. It gave him prestige, influence, and a permanent residence in the forum. His enemies realized he was more dangerous than they had imagined. After serving as praetor, Caesar was assigned to govern a province in Spain. There he faced not just administrative duties but military challenges. He raised armies, defeated hostile tribes, and filled his coffers with plunder, money desperately needed to pay off his debts. It was in Spain that a moment of destiny struck him. Passing a statue of Alexander the Great, Caesar reportedly wept. He was in his mid-30s, and Alexander, at the same age, had already conquered half the known world. Caesar had accomplished much, but compared to Alexander, he felt small. This was not despair, it was fuel. He returned to Rome with renewed determination. If Alexander could rule an empire, so could he. By the late 60s BCE, two men dominated Roman politics: Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, Pompey the Great, and Marcus Licinius Crassus. Pompey was a brilliant general, adored by his soldiers and respected by much of Rome. He had crushed pirates in the Mediterranean and expanded Roman power in the East. He was perhaps the most celebrated commander of his generation. Crassus, on the other hand, was not beloved for his military genius, though he had helped defeat the slave revolt of Spartacus. His power came from wealth. He was the richest man in Rome, with vast estates, mines, and influence over the financial world of the Republic. These two men were rivals. Pompey sought legitimacy and land grants for his veterans, but the Senate often blocked him. Crassus sought influence to match his wealth, but found himself isolated. Both had power, but both lacked the political finesse to control Rome outright. And then there was Caesar, ambitious, popular, and skilled at navigating the treacherous waters of Roman politics. In 60 BCE, Caesar saw an opportunity. Alone, he could not yet match Pompey or Crassus, but together, the three of them could dominate the Republic. So Caesar brokered a deal, a secret alliance that would change Rome forever. It became known as the First Triumvirate, though it was not an official office or legal body. It was simply three men agreeing to share power, bound together by ambition. Pompey would gain land for his veterans and recognition of his eastern conquests. Crassus would secure favorable tax contracts for his allies. Caesar would win the consulship, the highest office in Rome, and with it, the chance to reshape the Republic. Together, they were unstoppable. When Caesar ran for consul in 59 BCE, his alliance with Pompey and Crassus carried him to victory. He became the leading magistrate of Rome, the highest step on the cursus honorum. Yet he was no mere caretaker of tradition. He immediately used his power to pass radical reforms, rewarding his allies and enraging the Senate. Caesar's consulship was marked by drama from the start. His co-consul Bibulus, a staunch conservative, tried to block him at every turn. But Caesar was relentless. When Bibulus attempted to obstruct legislation, Caesar simply ignored him. At one point, Bibulus withdrew from public life altogether, declaring that he would watch the heavens for omens. A political maneuver meant to halt proceedings. Caesar mocked him and carried on. For the rest of the year, people joked that the consulship was not of Caesar and Bibulus, but of Julius and Caesar. Caesar pushed through land reforms for Pompey's veterans, financial benefits for Crassus's allies, and measures that made him immensely popular with the people. He showed no fear of the Senate, no hesitation in bending tradition to his will. By the end of his consulship, his enemies seethed. But Caesar had achieved everything he wanted, and he had secured the next prize, a provincial command. When his consulship ended, Caesar was appointed governor of Cisalpine Gaul and Illyricum, with later extension into Transalpine Gaul. This was no minor assignment. Gaul, modern France and Belgium, was unstable, restless, and filled with tribes that defied Roman control. For Caesar, this was a dream. Provinces meant legions. Legions meant loyalty, conquest, and glory. In Rome, politics was a dangerous game, but on the battlefield, he could build an empire. He was 41 years old when he departed for Gaul. The Republic believed it had granted him a distant province to keep him occupied. In reality, it had given him the stage upon which he would transform himself from a clever politician into one of the greatest military leaders in history. Caesar's rise in politics had been dramatic enough. He had survived Sulla's purges, charmed the people, outmaneuvered rivals, and allied with two of the most powerful men in Rome. But all of it was only preparation. Ahead lay nearly a decade of war, conquest, and unimaginable ambition. In the forests and fields of Gaul, Caesar would earn the devotion of his soldiers, the fear of his enemies, and a reputation that no Roman could ignore. And when he returned from those campaigns, he would not return as a politician, but as a conqueror. When Caesar left Rome in 58 BCE to govern Gaul, he was already an accomplished politician. But politics, even when successful, was fleeting. Alliances shifted, enemies multiplied, and the Senate could strip a man of his influence in an instant. Military power, however, was different. A victorious general commanded the loyalty of his legions and the admiration of the Roman people. Gaul offered Caesar both risk and opportunity. It was a land of forests and rivers, of fiercely independent tribes who resisted Rome's control. To the Senate, Gaul was a troublesome frontier. To Caesar, it was the stage upon which he would achieve glory to rival Alexander the Great. He arrived with 4 legions, roughly 20,000 men. Within a few years, that number would grow, as soldiers flocked to his banners and new legions were raised. These men would become more than an army. They would become the instrument of Caesar's destiny. Caesar's first great challenge came immediately. The Helvetii, a powerful Celtic tribe from what is now Switzerland, had decided to abandon their homeland and migrate westward. Their movement threatened to destabilize the entire region, and neighboring tribes called upon Rome for help. Caesar saw his chance. He marched swiftly to confront the Helvetii, blocking their path with his legions. The Helvetii requested safe passage, but Caesar refused. Instead, he fortified positions along the Rhone River, forcing them to find another route. The conflict escalated into full-scale war. At the Battle of Bibracte, Caesar's legions faced the Helvetii in a brutal contest. The fighting was fierce, but Roman discipline and organization prevailed. The Helvetii were crushed and their survivors forced to return to their lands under Roman supervision. This was Caesar's first major victory in Gaul. It announced to friend and foe alike that he was not a caretaker governor. He was a conqueror. Caesar quickly realized that conquest alone would not secure Gaul. The region was a patchwork of tribes, each with its own leaders, rivalries, and ambitions. If united, they might have resisted him. Divided, they were vulnerable. So Caesar became not only a general, but a master politician among the Gauls. He forged alliances with some tribes, offering protection and rewards, while crushing others who opposed him. He promised friendship, but demanded obedience. In every deal, he positioned himself as Rome's benefactor and Rome's enforcer. His strategy worked. Many tribes accepted Roman rule, preferring alliance with Caesar over annihilation, but others resisted, and resistance meant war. In 58 BCE, as Caesar dealt with the Helvetii, another threat loomed: Germanic tribes led by the warlord Ariovistus. Crossing the Rhine, Ariovistus had established a foothold in Gaul and terrorized local tribes. Caesar could not allow this. To leave Ariovistus unchecked would mean surrendering Gaul to foreign domination, but to confront him meant facing warriors renowned for their ferocity. Caesar chose confrontation. He marched his legions to meet Ariovistus, sending envoys demanding that the Germans withdraw. Ariovistus refused, mocking Rome and boasting that no one could stand against him. The two armies clashed near the Vosges Mountains. Caesar's soldiers, disciplined and well-armored, met the Germanic horde in brutal hand-to-hand combat. The fighting was savage, but once again Roman training prevailed. Ariovistus was defeated, his forces slaughtered or driven back across the Rhine. For Rome, this was more than a victory. It was a message. Caesar had secured Gaul against both internal rebellion and external invasion. For Caesar, it was another step toward greatness. Over the next several years, Caesar's campaigns expanded. He fought the Belgae in northern Gaul, the nervy and fierce battles where Roman legions nearly broke, and countless smaller tribes who rose against him. Each time he displayed brilliance in strategy, speed in movement, and an uncanny ability to inspire loyalty in his men. He did not merely order his soldiers, he shared their hardships. He marched with them, ate with them, and endured the same cold and hunger. His presence in camp made his men believe he was one of them, not a distant commander. This bond proved crucial. Caesar's legions came to believe that victory was inevitable under his leadership. They called him imperator with genuine devotion, not just formal respect. Their loyalty would one day change the fate of Rome itself. By 55 BCE, Caesar's ambitions had grown beyond Gaul. Across the Channel lay the mysterious island of Britain, known to Romans but never conquered. Though not strategically essential, Britain offered Caesar the chance for unprecedented glory. A Roman general setting foot on that distant shore would be seen as a new Alexander crossing into unknown lands. So Caesar prepared an expedition. With a fleet of ships, he crossed the stormy waters and landed on British soil. The local tribes resisted fiercely, using chariots and guerrilla tactics unfamiliar to Roman soldiers. The weather was harsh, the logistics difficult, yet Caesar succeeded. Though his gains were limited, his very presence in Britain was a triumph. He returned to Gaul boasting that he had achieved what no Roman had done before. The people of Rome, hearing the news, celebrated him as a hero who pushed the boundaries of their world. Caesar's conquests brought wealth and prestige, but also resentment. The Gauls were proud, and though many submitted, they chafed under Roman domination. In 52 BCE, resistance erupted in the most dangerous uprising yet, led by a young chieftain named Vercingetorix. Charismatic and cunning, Vercingetorix united the Gallic tribes in a way none had managed before. His strategy was simple but effective. Scorched earth. Villages were burned, crops destroyed, to deny Caesar's legions food and shelter. Guerrilla tactics harassed the Romans, forcing them into constant struggle. Caesar faced his greatest test. The climactic moment came at the fortress city of Alesia. There, Vercingetorix and his army fortified themselves behind massive defenses. Caesar, unwilling to storm such strong walls directly, devised a brilliant plan. He built his own walls around the city, encircling Alesia completely. It was a staggering feat of engineering. Traps, trenches, palisades, and fortifications stretched for miles, designed to starve the Gauls into submission. When a relief army of hundreds of thousands came to break the siege, Caesar revealed his genius. He had built not one, but two sets of walls, one facing inward toward Alesia, and one outward to block reinforcements. For days the Romans fought desperate battles on both fronts. Caesar himself rode along the lines, rallying his men, urging them to hold. The fighting was brutal, but the discipline of the legions held firm. At last, the relief army was broken, and Alesia surrendered. Vercingetorix, once the hope of Gaul, laid down his weapons at Caesar's feet. The image of the proud chieftain kneeling before the Roman general became legendary. With Alesia, Caesar's conquest of Gaul was complete. After nearly a decade of war, Caesar had achieved more than any Roman in living memory. He subdued an entire region, expanded the Republic's borders to the Atlantic Ocean, and crossed into Britain. But his rewards were more than territorial. He returned with unimaginable wealth from plunder, tribute, and slaves. This money not only enriched him, but allowed him to pay his debts, reward his soldiers, and fund future ambitions. More importantly, he returned with an army utterly devoted to him. These legions were not just soldiers, they were veterans who had fought with him through countless battles, who trusted him more than they trusted the Senate, who would follow him anywhere. In Rome, Caesar's reputation soared. The people adored him, celebrating his victories with festivals and ceremonies. But in the Senate, fear grew. A general with wealth, popularity, and the loyalty of battle-hardened legions was not a servant of the Republic. He was a threat to it. It is worth noting that Caesar himself ensured his fame would endure. Throughout his campaigns, he wrote detailed commentaries, the Gallic Wars, which were published in Rome. These works were not dry military reports. They were masterfully written, presenting Caesar as a brilliant strategist, a protector of Rome, and a man favored by fortune. Ordinary Romans read them eagerly, following his victories as if reading a thrilling adventure. The Senate saw them as propaganda, and they were right. Caesar was not only conquering Gaul with the sword, but also conquering Rome with the pen. By the end of the Gallic Wars, Caesar stood at the height of his power. He had transformed from an ambitious politician into one of the greatest generals Rome had ever known. He commanded wealth, loyalty, and prestige that rivaled, if not surpassed, any other Roman. But with power came fear. The Senate, led by his rivals, grew determined to cut him down. Pompey, once his ally, began to drift toward the conservatives, wary of Caesar's growing strength. Crassus, the third member of their alliance, had died in Parthia, leaving the Triumvirate broken. The stage was set for the next act. Caesar's conquest of Gaul had made him a hero to the people, but also an enemy to the Senate. And as his command came to an end, the question loomed. Would he surrender his legions and return as a private citizen, vulnerable to prosecution by his enemies, or would he march on Rome itself? The conquest of Gaul was more than a military campaign. It was the making of Caesar. He entered Gaul as a skilled politician seeking glory. He left it as a conqueror with the power to rival the Republic itself. The Senate trembled. The people cheered, and Caesar, with the loyalty of his veterans and the fire of ambition burning in his heart, faced the choice that would determine the fate of Rome. By 50 BCE, Julius Caesar was the most powerful man in Rome, but he was not in Rome. He remained in Gaul, his command nearing its end, his enemies waiting for the moment to strike. The Senate, dominated by his rivals, feared what he had become. He had wealth, legions, and the adoration of the Roman people. If he returned as a private citizen, he could be stripped of protection and prosecuted for the many laws he had bent, or broken, during his consulship. For Caesar, this would mean ruin. Yet for the Senate, there was an even greater fear, that Caesar would refuse to give up power at all. The first triumvirate that had once dominated Rome was dead. Crassus had perished in 53 BCE at Carrhae, leading a disastrous campaign against the Parthians. His death removed the balance between Pompey and Caesar, leaving the two former allies to eye each other with suspicion. Pompey had drifted toward the Senate's side, becoming their champion against Caesar. He was given new powers, new legions, and authority in Italy. The Senate hoped he would be the bulwark against Caesar's ambition. But Pompey underestimated just how far Caesar had come. He was no longer a clever politician reliant on alliances. He was a general with legions hardened by a decade of conquest, utterly devoted to him. The friendship that once bound them had turned into rivalry, and rivalry into looming war. In 50 BCE, the Senate made its move. They declared that Caesar must disband his legions and return to Rome as a private citizen. Pompey was named sole consul, effectively dictator, with the backing of most senators. The message was clear: surrender your power, or be declared an enemy of the Republic. Caesar hesitated. He knew that returning without his army meant humiliation, trial, and likely death. Yet marching on Rome would mean civil war, Roman against Roman, brother against brother. The choice was not easy, but it was inevitable. Caesar had not spent years conquering Gaul to return in chains. In January 49th of BCE, Caesar stood with his 13th legion at the banks of the Rubicon River, the small stream that marked the legal boundary of his command. To cross with an army was treason, To stay behind was to surrender his life to his enemies. Legend tells us he paused, considering the weight of his decision. Then, with resolve, he gave the order to march. As his soldiers crossed the waters, he is said to have declared, "Alia iacta est," the die is cast. The Rubicon was crossed. The Republic would never be the same. When word reached Rome that Caesar was marching south with his legion, panic swept the city. Senators fled, fearing his wrath. Pompey, caught off guard, declared that he could not hold Rome. He retreated to the south, gathering forces and abandoning the capital to Caesar. Incredibly, Caesar entered Rome without bloodshed. The city welcomed him not as a tyrant but as a savior. Many were tired of the Senate's corruption, tired of Pompey's dominance, and thrilled by Caesar's return. But Caesar was not interested in ruling an empty city. To secure his power, he needed to defeat Pompey, and that meant pursuing him. Pompey retreated to Greece, where he raised a massive army with the support of the eastern provinces. The Senate's strongest men rallied to his side, declaring themselves the defenders of the Republic. Caesar, ever bold, pursued them. But before crossing into Greece, he secured control of Italy, Spain, and vital grain supplies. He moved with astonishing speed, ensuring that Pompey's supporters could not cut off his resources. By the time Caesar sailed east, the stage was set for a colossal confrontation between Rome's two greatest generals. In 48 BCE, Caesar landed in Greece with his legions. He faced Pompey at Dyrrhachium, where Pompey's forces were larger and better supplied. Caesar attempted to encircle Pompey's camp, building fortifications in his typical bold style. But this time, it was too daring. Pompey broke through, inflicting a rare defeat on Caesar. For a moment, it seemed the tide had turned. Yet Pompey hesitated. Rather than press his advantage, he held back. That hesitation was fatal. Caesar regrouped, his army unshaken in loyalty. The decisive battle was yet to come. On August 9th, 48 BCE, the two armies met at Pharsalus in central Greece. As the battle began, Pompey's cavalry surged forward, pushing Caesar's horsemen back. For a moment, it seemed victory was his. But Caesar had anticipated this. He had hidden a line of infantry behind his cavalry, trained specifically to fight off mounted troops. At the crucial moment, they lunged forward, driving their spears into the charging horsemen. Pompey's cavalry broke, fleeing the field. With his flank exposed, Caesar unleashed his legions in a devastating counterattack. The result was slaughter. Pompey's army collapsed, tens of thousands cut down or captured. Pompey himself fled the battlefield, his dream of victory shattered. Pompey escaped to Egypt, hoping to find refuge with King Ptolemy the Thegned. But the young king, eager to please Caesar, betrayed him. As Pompey stepped ashore, he was murdered, stabbed to death by men who once claimed to be his allies. When Caesar arrived days later, he was presented with Pompey's severed head. He wept. Despite their rivalry, Pompey had once been his ally, his friend, even his son-in-law. To die in such a pitiful way, abandoned and betrayed, was a tragedy. But Caesar did not let grief halt his ambition. He stayed in Egypt, becoming entangled in the power struggles of the Ptolemaic dynasty, and in the arms of Cleopatra. In Alexandria, Caesar met Cleopatra, the young queen of Egypt. Intelligent, ambitious, and charismatic, she captivated him. Their alliance was both political and personal. With Caesar's support, Cleopatra secured her throne. With Cleopatra's support, Caesar gained vast wealth and influence in the East. Their relationship became legendary, producing a son, Caesarion. For Caesar, it was not only a love affair but also a statement of his global ambition. He was not content to be master of Rome alone. He aimed to shape the entire Mediterranean world. After Egypt, Caesar turned to the remnants of Pompey's allies. In 47 BCE, he marched to Asia Minor, where King Pharnaces, son of Mithridates, had risen against Rome. Caesar crushed him swiftly at the Battle of Zela. His victory was so quick that he sent a famous message back to Rome: Veni, vidi, vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. It was pure Caesar, bold, triumphant, and unforgettable. By 45 BCE, after campaigns in Africa and Spain, Caesar had defeated all remaining opposition. His enemies were dead or scattered, their legions destroyed. The Republic had resisted him, but he had triumphed. He returned to Rome not as a fugitive, not as a general waiting for permission, but as master of the state. He was appointed dictator, first for a year, then for 10 years, and finally for life. Caesar had done the unthinkable. He had crossed the Rubicon, defied the Senate, defeated Pompey, and claimed supreme power. The Republic, in all but name, was gone. The Civil War was over, but Caesar's story was not. Victory was only the beginning. With absolute power in his hands, he would reshape Rome, reform its laws, and declare himself dictator for life. But in doing so, he would awaken the fears of those who still clung to the idea of the Republic, and those fears would soon lead to daggers. By 46 BCE, Julius Caesar stood at the pinnacle of power. His enemies were dead or defeated, his legions unmatched, and the Roman Senate, once the proud guardian of the Republic, was reduced to a frightened assembly of men who dared not oppose him. He was named dictator first for 10 years, then for life. Never before had one man held such authority in Rome. To some he was a savior, restoring order after years of chaos. To others he was a tyrant who had destroyed the Republic in all but name. Yet Caesar was not content simply to wear the crown of victory. He wanted to rule, to build, to reform, and in this, he proved as ambitious in politics as he had been in war. Caesar understood that Rome was no longer just a city or even a nation. It was an empire stretching across the Mediterranean. Its problems were vast: debt, corruption, food shortages, overpopulation, and the resentment of conquered peoples. So Caesar set out to reshape the state. His reforms touched nearly every part of Roman life. First, he moved to expand the Senate, increasing its numbers to over 900 members. On paper, this made the Senate more inclusive, bringing in men from across the provinces. In practice, it diluted the power of the old aristocracy and packed the Senate with his supporters. He also restructured the courts, reducing corruption, and introduced laws that strengthened central authority. Magistrates, once easily bribed or swayed, now answered more directly to Caesar. These measures pleased some but enraged others. To the traditionalists, Caesar was dismantling the Republic piece by piece, replacing centuries of balance with one man's will. Caesar also turned his attention to Rome's struggling masses. He reduced debt by enacting new laws on interest, easing the burden on ordinary citizens. He restructured the grain dole, ensuring that fewer people abused the system, while the truly needy still received support. He launched vast building projects, putting the poor to work and beautifying the city. Temples, forums, and public works rose across Rome, stamped with Caesar's legacy. For veterans, he provided land in conquered territories, settling them across the empire in colonies that spread Roman culture and secured loyalty to him personally. To many Romans, Caesar seemed a generous benefactor. Bread, jobs, and land flowed from his hands. But to the Senate elite, every act of generosity was another chain binding the people's loyalty to Caesar instead of the Republic. Perhaps his most enduring achievement was his reform of the calendar. The old Roman system was hopelessly out of sync with the solar year, manipulated by politicians who extended or shortened years to benefit themselves. With the help of Egyptian astronomers, Caesar introduced the Julian calendar in 45 BCE, a system with 365 days, a leap year every 4 years, and months of fixed length. It was simple, practical, and astonishingly accurate. So accurate, in fact, that its descendant is still in use today. Every date we mark owes something to Caesar's vision of order. Caesar understood power was not only about laws and armies, but also image. He staged magnificent triumphs to celebrate his victories. 4 great processions marched through Rome, displaying treasures, captives, and the spoils of Gaul, Egypt, Pontus, and Africa. The people roared his name, showering him with honors. Statues of Caesar appeared across the city. His portrait was stamped on coins, something no Roman had dared before. And yet, amid the glory, there were whispers. Too many honors, too much power. When he was offered a crown by Mark Antony during the festival of Lupercalia, Caesar refused it publicly, insisting he was no king. But the gesture fooled few. The fact that the offer was made at all showed how close Rome had come to monarchy. In 44 BCE, the Senate granted Caesar the title of Dictator Perpetuo, dictator for life. To his supporters, it was recognition of his greatness. To his enemies, it was the death of the Republic. He sat on a golden chair in the Senate. He wore purple robes reserved for kings. His statue stood among the gods. And though Caesar may have believed he was reshaping Rome for the better, many senators saw only tyranny. They remembered their ancestors who had driven out kings centuries earlier. To them, Caesar was no reformer. He was a monarch in all but name. For all his brilliance, Caesar was blind to one thing: the depth of resentment growing around him. His reforms, his honors, his absolute power, all of it alienated the Senate elite, men who once shared power as equals, but now bowed as subjects. Even those who had fought beside him in war began to waver. To them, Caesar was no longer first among equals. He was their master. And so, in the shadows, whispers of conspiracy began to spread. Senators who once praised him now plotted his downfall. Ironically, Caesar's reforms were far from complete. He had plans for more: campaigns in the east against Parthia, expansion deeper into the empire, and new laws to stabilize Rome for generations. He dreamed of making Rome not just a republic, not just an empire, but a unified state, orderly and eternal. His ambition was nothing less than reshaping the world. But ambition breeds enemies. And though Caesar had triumphed in war, his greatest danger was not on the battlefield, but in the very heart of Rome. In 44 BCE, Julius Caesar was at the height of his power, a conqueror turned statesman, a dictator with a vision for Rome's future. He had crossed every boundary, broken every limit, and built a legacy that seemed unshakable. But in the Senate, daggers were being sharpened. The Ides of March approached, and with it the moment when Caesar's story would take its most dramatic turn. By early 44 BCE, Julius Caesar was dictator for life, Rome's unchallenged master. But absolute power breeds absolute fear. In the Senate, old resentments festered. The Republic, in name still alive, seemed in reality already dead. To the common people, Caesar was generous, a provider of land, grain, and spectacle. But to senators, he was a tyrant who humiliated them daily with his authority. He no longer sought their counsel. He commanded. Whispers turned to plans. A conspiracy began to form, led by men who called themselves liberators. Among them were senators Caesar trusted, even loved. Marcus Junius Brutus, descended from the man who had expelled Rome's last king, believed he was defending the Republic. Gaius Cassius Longinus, once a supporter of Pompey, seethed with resentment. Dozens more joined, their daggers hidden behind oaths of loyalty. Ancient writers tell us that in the days before his death, strange omens abounded. The soothsayer Spurinna warned Caesar to beware the Ides of March. His wife Calpurnia dreamed of his body lying bloody in her arms and begged him not to go to the Senate on that fateful day. Even on the morning of March 15, 44 BCE, Caesar hesitated. But Decimus Brutus, one of the conspirators, convinced him otherwise. To skip the Senate would look weak, dishonorable, unworthy of a man who had conquered the world. Caesar, ever proud, dismissed the warnings. He set out for the theater of Pompey where the Senate was to meet. Inside, the conspirators gathered. As Caesar took his seat, they surrounded him under the pretense of presenting a petition. Suddenly, a dagger flashed, then another. Caesar fought back at first, but the attack was relentless. One by one, the senators struck. Ancient accounts claim he received 23 wounds. When he saw Brutus among them, the man he considered almost a son, he is said to have uttered the immortal words, "Et tu, Brute." You too, Brutus? Whether he spoke them or not, the betrayal was clear. Overwhelmed, Caesar fell at the base of Pompey's statue, the very man he had once defeated. Blood pooled around him, the conqueror of Gaul and master of Rome brought down not by foreign enemies but by his own peers. The conspirators believed they had saved the Republic. In reality, they had destroyed it. Instead of restoring liberty, they unleashed chaos. The people mourned Caesar, furious at his murderers. Riots erupted. His funeral, marked by fiery speeches from Mark Antony, turned into a rally for vengeance. The liberators fled, hunted by Caesar's allies. Within a generation, the republic they claimed to defend would be gone forever, replaced by the Roman Empire under Caesar's heir. The Ides of March was not just the end of Caesar, it was the end of the republic. His assassination ensured that his name would echo through history, not as a king who reigned briefly, but as the man whose death marked the birth of an empire. When Julius Caesar fell beneath the daggers of the conspirators on the Ides of March 44 BCE, Rome was thrust into chaos. His killers believed they had restored the republic. In truth, they had only lit the fuse of a new civil war. Mark Antony seized the moment, delivering a funeral oration that stoked the fury of the Roman people. Caesar's body, displayed to the crowds, bore the marks of betrayal. The citizens, loyal to their champion, rioted against the conspirators who fled the city. Soon Caesar's chosen heir, Octavian, later Augustus, would rise. He was young, untested, but brilliant. With Antony, he avenged Caesar, hunting down the assassins at Philippi. But their alliance collapsed, ending in another civil war, and Octavian emerged as Rome's first emperor. Thus Caesar's death did not save the republic. It destroyed it. Julius Caesar's life is a story of contradictions. He was both a populist champion and a ruthless dictator, a reformer who eased debts and fed the poor, and a conqueror who enslaved entire nations. His genius on the battlefield was matched by his cunning in politics. Few men in history have combined both so completely. He left behind not only victories and reforms, but a vision of power that reshaped Rome forever. The Julian calendar he created endures in modern form. The colonies he founded spread Roman culture across Europe. The very month of July still bears his name. Even in death, his legacy was immense. The word Caesar itself became a title of rulers, Kaiser in Germany, Tsar in Russia, echoing for centuries after the Republic was gone. Historians have debated for 2,000 years, was Caesar the savior of Rome or its destroyer? To his supporters, he was a visionary who broke the stranglehold of corrupt senators, expanded citizenship, reformed government, and gave voice to the people. Without him, Rome might have collapsed into endless chaos. To his enemies, he was a tyrant who trampled the republic, centralized all power, and paved the way for monarchy. The Senate, once proud and powerful, became little more than a rubber stamp for his will. Perhaps the truth lies in both. Caesar was not a man of moderation. He was a man of extremes, ambition without limit, vision without pause. In his rise, he revealed both the brilliance and the fragility of the Roman system. Beyond the politics and battles, who was Julius Caesar? He was a man of charm, wit, and relentless energy. He cultivated loyalty by sharing the hardships of his soldiers, by speaking directly to the people, by writing with clarity and brilliance. He loved luxury, yet endured hardship. He was capable of great generosity and ruthless cruelty. His ambition was boundless. He once wept before a statue of Alexander the Great, lamenting that by his age Alexander had conquered the world, while he had achieved so little. It was this hunger, this restlessness that drove him to cross the Rubicon, to march into history, and to leave a legacy no one could ignore. Julius Caesar's life teaches us about the power and peril of ambition. He rose higher than any man of his age, but in doing so he shattered the very system that gave him power. The Republic could not contain him, and in truth it may have been doomed long before he arrived. The corruption, inequality, and inefficiency of Roman politics created the space for a man like Caesar to dominate. His rise was as much a symptom of Rome's decline as it was the cause of it. In his story, we see the eternal tension between liberty and order, between collective rule and the will of a single leader. It is a question every society faces, in every age. More than 2,000 years have passed since Caesar fell on the Senate floor. Yet his name remains one of the most famous in history. His story has been told and retold, a tale of glory and betrayal, ambition and downfall. He was a general, a statesman, a reformer, a dictator. He was loved, hated, feared, and admired. Few men have left such an indelible mark on the world. Rome would never be the same after Caesar. From his ashes rose an empire that endured for centuries, and long after Rome itself fell, the legend of Julius Caesar continued to shape kings, emperors, and nations. So when we speak of Caesar, we are not only telling the story of a man, we are telling the story of power itself, its allure, its dangers, and its legacy. And that is why, more than 2 millennia later, we still remember the man who crossed the Rubicon, defied the Senate, and changed the course of history forever. Thank you for watching this journey through the life and legacy of Julius Caesar. If you enjoyed this documentary and want to see more deep dives into the Roman Empire, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Roman Archives, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps us bring more of Rome's history back to life.